Today we're going to talk with Ray Dupuis about fishing on the Nipigon River especially, and some of the changes that have taken place over the maybe the last couple of decades on the river.
Okay, for fishing the river only, I started in probably about 1951, 52, going to Power Machine. Okay, I first went in there with Dan Gapin. We walked from Nipigon along the railroad tracks, and that was a long walk. Anyway, I later found out a shorter way, and I'd go to about 7 miles up the Cameron Falls Road and walk down. It was a much shorter way in through there. That's when I first started fishing it. And at that time, when you'd get on the railroad bridge, you could look down and you'd see anywhere between 20 and 30 speckled trout on the upper part of the river. They'd run anywhere from 2 pounds to about 9 or 10 pounds. On the downside, you could look there and you'd see loads of pike down in there. And if you went up to the first trestle, it was loaded with pickerel. You could just see the white tails in that. There was fish like you wouldn't believe. I'm talking about 1951, 52, 53, somewhere around that time. Dan and I started fishing that. I first fished that with Dan. And we would take turns because we used a live cockatoo at the time. And whoever took the first cast, you were guaranteed to get a speckled trout. So we'd trade off who would cast first. That went on for 2 or 3 years before he moved away from Nipigon.
So you were fishing from shore then, right?
We were fishing from shore then, yeah. And fishing from shore then, during the log drives, it was difficult to fish. But I would watch for the wood to go down and catch a part in between where I could cast out, and then stick my rod tip down below, about 2 or 3 feet below the wood, and reel in. I landed quite a few speckled trout that way, yeah. But there was a lot of speckled trout along through there. What they call the clay banks, and then below the river. And I was almost guaranteed to catch, you were allowed at that time 10 pounds plus 1, which more or less meant you could keep about 3 5-pound speckled trout, and that wasn't a problem at all in the river. I didn't start releasing them that early. I started releasing in about 1955, and most of that was actually on Lake Nipigon when I first, if you want, I can tell you a few tales of Lake Nipigon if you want.
Sure, whatever you feel comfortable talking about.
Okay, at one time I wanted to go into the tourist business, and you probably recall Buzzy Tacey. I was working on the mill at that time, and he had been working at the mill, but then he got into the tourist business, and he called me one day and he said, "Ray, why don't you start a business in Lake Nipigon, because there's lots of room for more." I said, "It sounds good," and I loved the fishing. So what I did, I went up there on 3 different occasions. I built myself my own little 12-foot boat. At first I used a 7.5 horsepower, and then I got up into a 15. But I wanted to learn that lake, especially for speckled trout. So I would go, I would leave Nipigon, and at that time all I had was a sleeping bag. Oh, I didn't even have a sleeping bag, sorry, I got that later. All I had was a blanket and a tarp, that's all. And I would fish all day long. In the evening, wherever the shore was good, and I'd just go and lay down and go to sleep. Sometimes I'd fish almost till midnight. And I learned that lake pretty good on 3 different occasions. On one occasion, which, believe it or not, I couldn't bring enough gas. I only had a small boat, and I couldn't bring enough gas. So what I would do, I'd stay for a week. I'd just drift with the wind. And I learned a lot of stuff on drifting with the wind. I'm just trying to think of the movie of the fella. Well, it doesn't matter on there, but he discovered the same thing that I did. As I would go along with the wind, and I've noticed this with fault logs too, the same thing. pulp logs. Sometimes they'd be washed up onto the shore. Then the first thing you know, they're back out another 100 feet or more. My boat would do exactly the same thing. I don't know what it was, something to do with the currents or the moon or whatever it was, but that's the way it happened. So I would, like I said, just drift with the wind most of the time. And on this one trip, my wife drove me to Pine Portage. This was on a Sunday, and I told her, pick me up next Saturday at 9 o'clock. I'm going up north on the lake. And it was a beautiful day, and I went across up to the Kelvin Islands, and it was absolutely calm, a beautiful day, and I shut my motor off. I'd always gone a different way. This time I tried a different way this time. And I hadn't been there very long, and this boat comes along with an American, and I recognize him, Laurie McCollum, Laurie Manuel.
Okay.
McCollum and Manuel, they were both in the Navy in the Second World War, and they both had a tourist operation. But this is Laurie Manuel, and he shut his motor off about 30 feet from me, and he asked me where I'm from. I said, I just come from Pine Portage. He says, where's your boat? I said, what? Where's your boat? I'm in my boat. So he came over and he grabbed a hold of it. Where's your gas? There's my gas. He said, you'll never make it, son. I said, no, I'll make it. He said, look it. And I was going to Jackfish Island. He said, I've got 4 45-gallon drums of gasoline. You help yourself to all the gas you want. I said, I won't need it. I'll be just drifting with the wind. And that's to me, that's a pretty good story, that one.
Yeah.
Especially him being in the Navy, me being in this little own homemade boat, only 12 feet, and he's wondering, yeah. But anyhow, I made it. It was okay. I got back to Pine Portage 5 to 9 at night, and my wife was there waiting for me. But I learned that lake on the west side really good. But I got discouraged because I was guiding. I guided for Stan Gordon and for the Chalet Bungalow. I got discouraged on some of the guiding because of the way some of the tourists were, and I really didn't like it. So I thought, I don't think this is for me. So I stayed in the mill, which I'm glad I did. I learned a lot. But getting back to the river, I first started fishing in the river. I was about 12 years old. My father had bought me a bamboo fly rod, and I would just go down, and I'd only fish the shallow waters. I'd catch smaller speckled trout, 8, 9, 10, 12 inches. And later on, then I'd fish a little bit different water. I was afraid to go into some of it, where I only stayed in the one place at that time, because I was pretty young, and the water was to me, it was dangerous. Later on, I found out, well, it was okay as an adult, but then I would fly fish all along there, and I had a hard time landing anything over 5 pounds at that time, because of the reel that I had. It would kind of freeze up and my line would break. Later on I got better reels and so on. But anyhow, after I'm just trying to think here now. I'll just stay on the river. I fished it for many years, and like in Lake Nipigon, I did a lot of live release, loads of live release, because when I was during those weeks that I was up there, I would catch way too many fish, and I wouldn't keep them. And first on the live release, I learned the live release part when I was real young in Clearwater Creek. When at that time you couldn't keep a fish under 6 inches, and when we were caught anything small like that, I learned how to revive them. I knew when they were struggling it. You could tell by their gills. Like I don't know how they produce their oxygen or anything, but you could tell by their gills they would be more rapidly moving, and they seemed to be a little bit wider. And then once they seem to calm down or anything else, then they just look like a normal fish. But you don't normally see that. That I witnessed as a young child, or a young fisherman, put it that way. Anyway, on the Nipigon River then, probably about 20-25 years ago, I noticed boy, there's no more small speckled trout in here. What's happening? I didn't know what was happening, but some fellas saying, "Oh, there's lots of fish here. Look, I just caught an 8-pounder." And so I said, "Yeah, well, you're catching the 1-pounders and the 2-pounders. They're not there anymore. I don't know. There's something going on here." And I noticed this, especially through Parmachine, fishing up for every weekend. There weren't as many trout there at all. And I saw some big ones. The biggest I'd see up there, I figured to go around 12 pounds. Lots of 4, 5, and 6-pounders, but not very many big ones. But at the end, I wasn't seeing any smaller ones. I thought, something's happening here. I don't know what it is. So at that time, I approached the ministry, and they didn't seem to be, the people that were here weren't really too interested at that time on it. I said, well, something's happening, and I don't know. I said, I don't know what can be done. But it was 12 years that I brought it up. And it wasn't until Rob Swainson came, and Rob heard about me, and he asked me to meet him. I met him at the Nipigon Cafe, and I gave him my history of all the fishing. And when I finished, I had said, "Rob, we have to do something about it." And he recalls that. And if it hadn't been for Rob, we wouldn't have what we have today. He credits me for all the information that I gave him, but then he carried it forward after that. And he discovered after 2 or 3 years, he found, he did some underwater, I believe he was doing some scuba dive underwater and looking at different, especially in Lake and Gapin's pool. And he realized that something's happening here, and he thought it might be hydro. Because what he discovered then was that, and the river never used to be changed that much. But I believe it's controlled by Toronto right now, computerized or whatever it is. But what was happening, they were freezing the fry out in their spawning areas, both in Lake Nipigon and in Nipigon River. And it was through Rob's research, then we set up a committee. We did a lot of, my boys were all involved with it, and along with many other fellows too, where we did research on tagging speckled trout. On some of the, and by tagging them, live release works. We caught several of them 2 or 3 times. On one instance, Ray had caught one by Gurney, had it tagged. It was caught about a month later way out in the Straits. It was caught about another month later in the Nipigon Channel here somewhere. A year later, Ray caught it again right in front where he had released it. And the same thing happened with one that Joel had done. He had tagged one just not far from our camp on at Kama. A year later, I caught it under the same rock where he had tagged it. Yeah. Pierre and I, we went up the Jackass River, and we caught one above the falls. At one time, the fish couldn't get above the falls. I don't know what happened there. I fished it from the time I was about 14, 15. Well, I first went there in 1942 I was 10 years old with my father. And something happened there. I don't know whether they dynamited part of that dam out or not, but the fish can get up there now. When Domtar, they took a bulldozer and bulldozed the whole place right out to the highway, which destroyed a lot of the fishing holes. When they drove that river, this might have been sometime during the late 50s or early 60s. I forget the time on that. But anyhow, when I went there, I realized that it was either dynamited, because the fish can get up there now. There was never any rainbow up there before. I fished that river many, many years, and there was never any rainbow up above that. Now there's rainbow. But here's the thing. Way above the falls, we caught one of our tagged speckled trout, one that Joel had tagged, which shows that like live release is working. And now on that live release, then we set up, through Rob, we set up size limit. And we had set it up at one allowed at 22 inches. Now, we got a lot of flack on that. In fact, I still had flack here about 3 months ago on it. Yeah. But anyhow, we set the limit on it, the length. Not the length, but I'm sorry, we set the length on it. Yeah, I believe it's 22 inches. I lose track of those things, but it's 22 inches. You're allowed one. And now, it's come back tremendously. Last fall, this summer, well, not only this summer, but the last 3 or 4 summers, the Nipigon River, Lake Nipigon, the fishing is tremendous for the speckled trout. I did this more for the tourist industry, more than anything else. I would get involved in a lot of discussions. I got in many discussions when I was involved with I even got the jacket on here and I can't remember with the federal government on the how do you like that? When we set up the National Marine Conservation Area, yeah. When we set that up, now what I'm thinking about this now out there. Like I said, I had a lot of flack on different things. And one of the fellas. He wasn't against it, but it wasn't really for it at the time when it first came out. That was Gary Lang.
Oh yes.
Gary Lang. But he's got a good tour. Like I said, I was doing this more for the tourist operation than anything else. I would get involved in a lot of discussions, and I'd say, "Look, the ministry has stocked many, many lakes, and the fish in some of those lakes." I jar them because they're so good tasting. They're better tasting than Lake Nipigon and Lake Superior, because some of them are nothing but freshwater shrimp. So they're really good. And I try to encourage them, look, if you can release these fish, you can keep one. But if you really want speckled trout, go to these lakes. They're open all year round. Take advantage of that, because the ministry is doing it for us. And that is more or less to protect that part. Yeah, get back to Gary.
Right.
I spent some time with him and Dan Gapin doing some filming out there 2 or 3 years ago on some of the history out in that area. But Gary called me, I'll say last fall, after the fishing season was open. He said, "Ray, you're going to really like this." I said, "What?" He had, I think, 6 fishermen from Minneapolis, all fly fishermen, and they caught and released 71 speckled trout.
I took a
He
picture
said,
of
"That's how good it is now." And I thanked him for letting me know. But I've had a lot of good comments on all around. In fact, we're catching speckled trout now at Kama, where we haven't been catching them for about 30, 40 years. We're catching all of them there now. Yeah.
And I'm glad you're talking about the tourists, because it doesn't matter where you go, the Nipigon River comes up as the best place to fish. You can talk to anybody anywhere, and the Nipigon River is known. If you're a fisherman, you know about the Nipigon River.
You know about the Nipigon River.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Really
it's got a real good history. There's no doubt about that.
Yes, it has.
But the tourist operators on Lake Nipigon are happy about it. The live release has really caught on.
And is 22 inches still the same? The length still
the same, yeah. And barbless hooks in Lake Nipigon. Barbless hooks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I would like to get the stainless. I believe there's stainless steel hooks out, but the regular hook will rust out. I don't have enough experience with the stainless steel, but I kind of doubt that they're going to rust out like the other ones. Yeah. So I had mentioned it a few times on different occasions that I'd like to see the stainless steel taken out. But anyway.
So the benefit of the rusting out one is that
It'll dissolve.
dissolve if they break the line with the hook in.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And on live release, I've released a trout and tagged it, and in less than 15 minutes I caught it again. About 300 feet from where I'd first caught it.
So do you have to apply to the ministry for tags then, right? If you
No,
want to tag
we were
them?
approached. We were approached to do the research on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fellows from Thunder Bay have been involved in it, like my family too.
Right.
But at least about 30 people. We weren't the only ones that got involved in it. Yeah, and it's amazing the technology nowadays, because they could even fly over in the wintertime and locate the speckled trout through the ice. Yeah, so technology is unreal.
Right.
In today's world.
So tell us a little bit about how involved you people got with hydro to change the flow in the river.
Okay, through Rob Swainson, then he knew it was the hydro because of the with the research he had done. In fact, he had done quite a bit with a couple of my boys besides, and he was the one that got involved and set up a committee. There was about 12 of us on the committee to meet with hydro, and I have a hard time recalling everything, but we had several meetings, and of course hydro wasn't too happy about it, but Rob eventually, through the ministry, had the guidelines set that they had to keep a certain amount of flow between, I believe, September and May, to keep the level at a certain level so that they wouldn't freeze out the fry, and that has worked very well. So that was one of the biggest discoveries, is what had happened. So you lose, speckled trout only has a life of maximum 8 years. So you lose 2, 3, or 4 year classes, and that's what was happening. And I had noticed that, but not knowing what the problem was. I had noticed that the fish were going down, and that was the reason. They never used, pardon me, they never used to fluctuate the flow as great as what they did during some of the periods there.
Maybe when the logs were there, it was more steady.
It was more steady when the logs were.
Right,
yeah.
right. So do you have an opinion on the change with the lamprey? Now that they do the river regularly? Were you aware of a lot of lamprey years ago?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yes, definitely. In fact, I recall from when they first started. Yeah.
Do you see a difference now?
As far as the lamprey, they're still there. They're still there. There's still a lot of lamprey, but there's no doubt it is helping. Otherwise, we'd probably be overwhelmed with them.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think you'll ever get complete control on it, but
it is helping.
Oh yes, I would say definitely it's helping.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. Any other little stories about fish? So even mention maybe in this area all the different kinds of fish that, if you're out in a boat or if you're on shore, what you can catch.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the area is really good. Within a 30-40 mile radius, you can catch salmon, lake trout, speckled trout, rainbow trout, perch, big perch,
Pike.
pike, big northerns.
Can you still catch muskie around here?
For the first time that I've known about it is down around White River, somewhere in there. I believe you can catch muskie.
Oh.
I heard about it last summer for the very first time. Pardon me. And one of my sons went down there. He'd heard about it. And yes, there's muskie. Nothing locally here.
There used to be, though.
There may have been. I don't ever recall anyone on the muskie end of it.
I'm sure that Homer Bilal caught one years and years ago. And, oh God, a guy from Red Rock, married to Doreen Nikinen.
Oh,
He had one because he came to my place and I took a picture of him with it.
I see. Yeah.
But rare, right?
They're rare.
Rare, right, right. What about suckers? Do they take over anywhere?
Not really. No, you have, I guess, you got a couple of species of sucker, but you have the ones that they're really red-bellied ones, and then the regular white sucker. There's 2 or 3 or 4 species of them.
So a person can come here and fish for pretty well any kind of fish.
Anything, carp if
And-
you want to.
Oh yes, carp,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
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 Carp used to be in the lagoon, right?
Yeah.
That was Mr. Criff's favorite. I remember that. He used to
I-
pay the kids.
I caught them for another fella too. I can't think of the name right now. He wanted a carp, so I went and caught one for him. That's many years ago, though.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I never hear people say they get carp today.
Yeah, there's still carp in the river in there. Yeah,
Okay.
there used to be loads of them at Red Rock
Oh.
between the dock and the shoreline.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd go out there at noon hour when lunchtime, and you could see them all in there. Yeah, there was a lot. And years ago, it was loaded with perch right off the dock.
Right.
I'd fish. I'd have a. There was another friend of mine that worked. He's passed away now, but we would go. We had an hour and a half off for lunch, and we'd go there, and we would whoever got the most perch, the other fella had to buy the coke at the coffee time, and we would land around 30 each. Yeah, in that hour and a half, right off the dock. We released them all. We never kept any.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, Vern Ray did a report with us, and he talked about the little mill, going there and catching fish for his dad's supper. Because he
Could
said,
be, yeah.
Yeah, he said he just had to go fish offshore,
Yeah.
and he could come back with fish for his dad's supper. So very, very prolific to fish from shore.
Yeah, the lagoon was full of pickerel, absolutely full of pickerel
Ooh.
at one time. Yeah, the Finnish people, they seem to be the lucky ones, but we fish from shore. But they all made their own little homemade boats, and they just oared them, and they had that big thick green line with a spinner and a worm behind it. In those days, there was no limit. You catch all you want.
So you've also seen a change in the lures that are used today.
Oh yes, for sure. In fact, one of the lures that I make myself, Gordy Ellis wrote a column on that. In fact, you took a picture of it.
Yeah.
I've used that for many. I've won quite a few derbies with that.
Right.
It's the way you fish it, and it's the action that's on it. It's got really good action. It's a life-looking
Lure.
natural. Is the way it works.
How many years have you been making your own lures, right?
I started at making my own flies at about 8 years old. Yeah. I can tell you, do you want a little story on
Sure.
that one? Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, when I fished Clearwater Creek, there was one speckled trout there. It would be about 10 inches long. And it was underneath a log. And it would come out and see me and take off. I'd never catch it this went on for about 2 or 3 weeks. I thought, okay, I think I'm going to be able to catch you. So, my father had always told me squirrel tail is about the best. I had shot a squirrel with my slingshot. So I made a little fly, and what I didn't have a fly rod, but I used my mother's number 10 thread. It's pretty light, and I got a red willow about 5 or 6 feet long, and I went down after the sun had set, and I went in close there, and I let it fly down, and I caught it. And I released it.
Oh, wow.
I released it, yeah.
So that hooked you onto making your own.
That hooked me on making my own, yeah. I've been making my own ever since, yeah.
Right. So just give us a little insight into your Hall of Fame now.
In the Hall of Fame, it's not easy to get into. Not really at all. In fact, I have all the literature there at home. And I was nominated by Dan Gapin, a good friend of mine. But in order to enter the Hall of Fame, you had to do something that would
outstanding.
In a sense, outstanding,
Right.
that would promote the fishing industry. And on that, there's I put in the work on Clearwater Creek. I don't know if you know about the Clearwater
Yeah.
Creek when that was
Changed.
what happened there.
I just know it was changed.
Okay, it was changed. I can tell you what happened on the change of that. This is through Rob Swinson again and a committee. I wasn't involved in that, but they had the money and the resources to. What you probably know what happened during that big rainstorm in the 50s. Then the town diverted to this sewage, and that. You've probably seen that picture. It's down there with me. I was about 8 years old. Those fish were all caught in Clearwater Creek. They would spawn in there in September. They come in, and the biggest I would ever catch there would be around 2 pounds. Nothing bigger than that. But anyhow, now what happened? Rob wanted to restore that. For the simple reason is, you need all these feeder streams to keep the fishing industry going. The speckled trout. You lose 2 or 3 streams, which we had lost 2. I was involved in 2 of them. This is part of the reason for getting into the Hall of Fame, part of it. Anyway, on the Clearwater Creek, the town really didn't want to do it. And Rob called me, he said, "Ray, they're going to take the money away." This is about the 4th year now, and he wasn't getting anywhere with it. So Rob called me, he said, "Ray, can you talk any sense into the councillors because I'm going to lose the money?" I said, "Sure, I will." I didn't know anything about it. So I talked to the town council, and I gave them all my experience on that and the reason why we need it. And that's how we got it changed. Yeah, and it's working really good. So you need all these feeder streams to produce.
Right.
Another stream. This is one that I entered into, like the Fishing Hall of Fame, getting in there. The other one was the creek at Kama, where the CPR had changed the route of that creek, and it was not producing anymore like it used to. They used to spawn in there. So through Rob and we got that changed back to its natural area. Now the fish are coming in there and they're spawning. So there's 2 of them there. But the biggest one was the comeback of the speckled trout in Lake Superior, Nipigon River, and Lake Nipigon. Right. That was the biggest thing because it's been tremendous. It's famous waters to begin with, and I can take pride in that. It's worked. That's
Right.
about all I can say.
It's
really come back good.
It's interesting to me, though, that it was in the American Hall of Fame that you got nominated and inducted into that one.
Well, my friend Danny Gapins, he's in the Hall of Fame. His father, Don Gapins, in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Yeah, the only father and son Hall of Fame in that Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And he nominated me, and it takes, your name stands for 5 years. Yeah, and I got selected the first year. Now, like I said, it's not easy to get into.
No.
The committee, there's about 10 on that committee, and they're from all over the different states. They're from Florida, Minnesota, I think even one from Alaska, and so on. They're a committee, but they're separate. They're not together until the end, and then they come up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that way there's
no collaboration.
There's no collaboration there. Yeah, I've got all the data on it. It's pretty darn good.
Right.
So, like I said, it's not that easy to get into.
Right.
Yeah, because it's done very, very well, for sure. Yeah.
So our interviewer is a very famous person now in the fishing history, and I think it goes right along with all the posters that are behind Ray. And I think that's very good.
Okay, I could tell you something about this couple here if you want.
You got time? 3 minutes, okay?
3 minutes, okay. I was asked many years ago to interview anyone that was involved with the world record, and I interviewed a native through an interpreter, and what happened, they had caught this big fish, and they were going to eat it because it was in the evening, and they caught this big, and they thought it was lake trout. They were going to cook it. So they got this guide. He came up. I'm trying to speed this up. He came up with his lantern and verified there was a huge speckled trout. But he told me there was two of them. He caught that big one 14.5 pounds and another one 12 pounds. And he was talking about a couple of flies on the fishing line. Eh? It wasn't until well into the 100th anniversary. It wasn't a 12-pound speckled trout, which I thought it was. He had landed two speckled trout. One was 7 and the other one was 5 pounds. So there's the 12-pound. And that didn't come out until almost the end of all the fishing, all the stories we had read and everything else. Rob happened to pick that out somehow. I said, now that solves it. Because he told me he had another 12-pound speckled trout, but it was two fish. Yeah. So that's the story behind the two here.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool story.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great way to end the interview.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.